Whether it's a classic urban legend, something based on a true story, or just something your older siblings made up to scare you and give you nightmares, I'm looking at you, big brothers. We've all heard a story that has given us the heebie-jeebies. On today's most amazing top 10 list, I'll be covering just a few of the creepiest bedtime stories out there. Starting off our list at number 10 today, we have a true classic. A young girl was at home by herself with a dog while she was waiting for her parents to come home. The dog always slept by her bed and was there to protect her and help her feel secure. One night while she was in bed, she heard a dripping sound and she went to go and check the kitchen tap to make sure that it was turned off. When she got back into bed, she stuck her hand under the bed to feel the dog and he licked her hand and she went back to sleep. After hearing the dripping noise again, she went to inspect the bathroom tap before heading back to bed. Sticking her hand down to check on the dog again, the dog licked her hand and she continued trying to sleep. After still hearing the dripping noise, she went to investigate even further and check every tap in the house. This time, she listened closely and followed the sound of the dripping to locate exactly where it was coming from. She realized that it was coming from the closet, and when she opened it up, she found her dog who had been killed and realized that the dripping sound was his blood dripping on the floor. On the inside of the closet door was a note that read, "Humans can lick too." Yikes. At number 9 today, we have a strong reminder to be careful of strangers. But before I get into this one, just a reminder to click that little thumbs up to like this video. One beautiful day in Southampton, New York, a woman stopped for gas on the way to pick up her daughter, but was in a bit of a rush. As she was filling up, a man approached her and explained that his car had died and asked the woman if she could give him a ride to East Hampton for an appointment. The woman agreed since this was the same area she was headed to anyway, and the man put his briefcase in the back seat and then ran to use the washroom before they took off. As he was in the bathroom, the woman realized the time and panicked about being late to pick up her daughter and ended up forgetting all about the man and leaving without him. When the woman and her daughter arrived at home and she saw the briefcase in the back seat, she realized she had forgotten about him and went to search for some identification in order to get his belongings back to him. When she opened the briefcase, all that was in there was a knife and a roll of duct tape. Who knows what this man would have had planned, but I am so glad she forgot about him. In our number 8 spot, we have a reminder to travelers to always be wary. Remember when we could travel? The good old days. Anyway, a man is traveling for business and goes to the lounge for a drink at the end of a long day. Another person approaches the man and offers to buy him a drink. He accepts the drink, and this is the last thing he remembers before waking up. What the man didn't know is that the stranger is part of a very organized and highly skilled ring. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a hotel bathroom tub with his entire body submerged in ice. The man looks around and sees a small phone beside him and notices a note taped to the wall that tells him not to move, but to call 911. Once on the phone with 911, the operator asks him to slowly reach behind him to see if he can feel a tube coming out of his back. When the man answers yes, the operator tells him to remain still and the paramedics are on their way. What the man doesn't know, but the operator does, is that the man has had his kidneys harvested. I remember hearing this in elementary school and never wanting to travel anywhere again. Coming in at number 7, we have another one of the most classic creepy stories that I remember telling people when I was a kid. A teenage couple drives out to the secluded Makeout Hill for some time alone. When they arrive, they throw on the radio to listen to some music and begin smooching. After a little while, the music stopped and a news announcer came on the radio. They said that a convicted murderer had just escaped from an asylum and to be on the lookout. The man would be easy to spot as he had a hook for a hand. The couple realized that the asylum was not very far from where they currently were, which made the girl feel very uneasy, and she asked to head home. The boy reassured her and told her that he would lock all the doors and that they would be safe, and tried to continue kissing her. Like any sane person, the girl pushed him away and insisted that they head home now. The boy finally obliges and speeds off in a rush. When they arrive at the girl's home, she gets out of the car and reaches for the door before letting out a blood-curdling scream. When the boy comes around to see what she's screaming at, he sees a bloody hook dangling from the door handle. For number 6 today, we've got one that sends a chill down your spine. While this specific story isn't true, it is based on a story that unfortunately is true. There was an elderly couple who had been married for over 50 years and were so close that they joked about being able to hear each other's thoughts. Unfortunately, the woman fell ill, and after a couple days of being in a coma, she passed. Her husband was of course terribly upset over the loss of his life partner and had to be pried away from her. He became very distraught and began insisting that his wife was still alive. Even after she had been buried, he begged for her body to be exhumed, saying that he had visions and dreams of her trying to get out of her coffin. After this went on for a while, they finally agreed to dig up the coffin in order to give this man some peace of mind. But when they opened up the coffin, to everyone except for the man's surprise, they saw the bloody scratch marks all over the inside of the coffin, and the woman's fingernails were bent backwards. Maybe they really could hear each other's thoughts. Either way, they definitely should have listened to him sooner. At number 5 today, we've got a story of 2 college roommates who were in the same science class. One of the roommates, who we'll call Kim, was more of a partier, while the other one, who we'll call Jessica, tended to be more quiet and studious. One night before a science test, Kim got invited out to a party by a boy she liked, so instead of preparing for the exam like Jessica, she went out to have some fun. Kim came home super late from the party and decided not to wake Jessica. She was nervous about the exam, but she knew she could ask all of her questions in the morning before the class. Morning came quickly and Kim got out of bed, only to see Jessica sleeping soundly on her stomach. Kim went to wake her up when she saw that Jessica's study materials were still on the bed beside her, but were covered in blood. Kim, of course shocked at the murder scene she was standing in front of, fell to the floor. When she looked up, she saw written on the wall in Jessica's blood, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" At number 4 today, we have a true story that was featured on the podcast Radio Rental. A boy lived in a neighborhood that had 5 houses that were all close together that backed into a wooded area. All of the neighbors knew each other except for one house that everyone referred to as the mystery house. The kids would make up stories of who they thought lived there or what they thought the house contained. One day, a boy went into the wooded area on his own to play with his G.I. Joes when he got an eerie feeling that someone was watching him. He decided to pack up and go home, but when he turned to leave, he heard a girl's voice say, "You don't have to leave." He turned around to see a girl with messy mop-top hair and a thick flannel shirt buttoned all the way to the top, which he thought was weird since it was the middle of summer. The two struck up a friendship and played together for the weeks to come. She explained that she lived in the mystery house and her room was the entire top floor, almost like an attic. The room had one window that looked out into the wooded area. After a while, the little girl just disappeared and stopped coming out to play. A few months passed and the mystery house went up for sale. The boy's family decided to go to the open house so that everyone could finally see what was inside, and the boy went in hopes of seeing the little girl. The family met the couple that lived in the house and they explained that their daughter had passed away a few years prior. This made the boy's head spin as he had just played with the little girl a few months prior. Who had he been playing with? A few days later, he went back into the wooded area and looked up at the window that the little girl had explained was the window to her room. When he looked up, he saw the mother staring back at him, expressionless. It was then that he realized it had been the mother all along. In our number 3 spot today, we've got a story that is a pretty even mix of creepy and sad. There was a boy named Tom who was at school one day when he looked out the window and saw a photo laying in the grass. When the bell rang, he rushed out to grab the photo before anyone else could and saw it was a picture of a little girl doing a peace sign and smiling. He carried the picture home with him because he thought this little girl was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. When he arrived home, he showed the photo to his older sister and asked if she had ever seen the girl in the picture before. She said no, and he was devastated because he so badly wanted to figure out who this girl could be. That night, in the middle of the night, he heard a tapping on his window, followed by a little girl's giggling. He grabbed the photo and began to investigate, thinking that maybe this could lead him to his newfound crush. He continued following the giggling, which eventually led outside and onto the road, where he suddenly got hit by a car. When the driver of the car got out to help, he realized it was unfortunately too late. He saw the picture laying on the ground next to the boy and picked it up to see a beautiful little girl holding up 3 fingers. Coming in at number 2, we have a classic hitchhiker story. This one starts off on an extremely stormy night. A man is driving down the highway just trying to make it to his destination safely when he sees a hitchhiker on the side of the road. Shocked that anyone would be hitchhiking in this bad of a storm, he figured that he must have been in a huge rush and pulled over to pick the man up. The hitchhiker got into the car and the pair took off. The hitchhiker was giving off weird vibes and was mostly silent for the ride, so the driver began asking him simple questions to get a conversation started and try and get to know the stranger that he had just picked up. The hitchhiker gave mostly one-word responses and didn't really give away too much information about where he had been or where he was going. As they drove, the radio was playing a news show because the hitchhiker had mentioned he wasn't much of a music person. After several miles of travel, the news announcer on the radio said that there were reports of a patient escaping from a psychiatric institution. The hitchhiker quickly turned the channel, saying that he hated the news. The driver didn't reply to this, and the hitchhiker picked up on what the driver must have been thinking and said, "Don't worry, I'm not the killer," which is exactly what a killer would say. The driver replied with, "No?" and then quickly corrected himself by saying, "Of course you aren't." The driver continued to pry and asked what the hitchhiker did for a living. He revealed that he was a writer and was currently working on a book about a serial killer. The driver decided not to respond to this and just focus on the road and getting to where he could drop the hitchhiker off. The driver turned the news channel back on only to hear a new announcement that stated that they were getting more information on the escaped patient. They said his name was Simon Hughes and that he is extremely dangerous and unpredictable. They said that the patient had escaped by pretending to be one of the hospital staff and that he stole a car and drove off. This prompted the hitchhiker to ask the driver what his name was. The driver responded with, "My name is Simon." What a plot twist! I honestly did not see that one coming at all. For our number one spot today, we have a story that really got me. This story starts off with a man describing an old apartment he used to live in with an annoying upstairs neighbor. The neighbor was a weird-looking guy who always kept to himself. But every night around midnight, there would be a strange knocking noise coming from the upstairs apartment. It wasn't extremely loud, but because he was a light sleeper, it was extremely frustrating for him. Because of how often this happened, he started to realize that it was the same knocking pattern every time, like a record playing over and over with the same amount of time in between each knock. He ended up moving out and moving past this neighbor. Several years later, the man was helping his daughter with her homework, where she was learning simple phrases in Morse code. She knocked one on the table, and he instantly recognized this phrase as the same knocking pattern his neighbor had done all those years before. He of course had to ask her what it meant, and she just laughed and replied, "It's the easiest one, Daddy. It's the one to call for help." Alright guys, that has been our list today. Thank you so much for watching. I've been your host, Olivia Kozlowski, and it's time for me to go and watch some happy puppy videos because I am creeped out. I'll see you next time.